how the UK's Operation Bluestone fails the falsely accused. We're just here to find the truth. That was the first thing they said. Two police officers, polite but with an unmistakable firmness, standing in the hallway of the life I'd spent years building. They said they needed to ask a few questions, just to clear things up. But in that moment, everything changed. I wasn't a husband anymore, not a father, not a professional with a career. I was the suspect, and I was about to learn, in the most brutal way possible, that in the modern British justice system, the search for truth can look a lot like a hunt for guilt. This isn't just my story. It's the story of a system that was so profoundly broken that in the desperate rush to fix it, we may have created a new, equally devastating kind of failure. It's the story of a police initiative born from the very best intentions, designed to finally get justice for victims of a horrific crime. It's called Operation Bluestone. Its goal was to radically reform how police investigate rape by focusing intensely on the suspect from day one. A noble aim, born from years of failing victims and letting perpetrators walk free. But what happens when that intense focus lands on the wrong person? What happens when the system, pressured to get convictions, points its powerful, unblinking eye at an innocent man or woman? This is the story of Operation Bluestone's dark side. It's an exploration of how a well-intentioned reform, designed to protect one group of victims, risks creating another. The falsely accused, trapped in a nightmare with no easy way out. Their lives taken apart piece by piece, sometimes before a shred of credible evidence is even found. We're going to look at how this suspect-first model, driven by laudable goals, can become a breeding ground for tunnel vision and ultimately a terrifying miscarriage of justice. To understand why Operation Bluestone even exists, you have to grasp just how broken the old system was. For decades, the UK's record on rape investigations was a national shame. The statistics were, and still are, staggering. Year after year, tens of thousands of rapes were reported, but a tiny fraction ever led to a charge, let alone a conviction. In 2020, women's charities declared the situation so dire that rape was effectively being decriminalized. Victims faced a grueling, often traumatizing process, where it felt like they were the ones on trial. Their credibility, their history, their every decision, all of it was picked apart, while the suspect's behavior often seemed like an afterthought. This culture of disbelief was so pervasive that it crushed people's faith in justice. Victims were withdrawing from investigations in droves, not because their claims were false, but because the process itself was too damaging. They were subjected to what many called a digital strip search, with police demanding access to their most private data, medical records, therapy notes, years of social media history. It's no surprise that facing this ordeal and soul-crushing delays, most cases were closed simply because the victim couldn't endure it any longer. Something had to change. Public pressure and tireless campaigning led to the government's end-to-end rape review, an admission of catastrophic failure. The government apologized for failing victims and promised a radical overhaul. Out of this review, Operation Bluestone was born. It began as a pilot in Avon and Somerset, built on a unique collaboration between police and university academics to ground the reforms in evidence. Under the national program, Operation Soteria Bluestone, it was set to be rolled out across the country. The core idea was simple and revolutionary. Flip the script. Instead of focusing on the victim's credibility, police would now adopt a suspect-focused approach. From the very start, the investigation would center on the suspect's actions, history, and behavior. The goals were commendable: improve victim support, increase charge rates, and put the focus where it belonged, on the alleged perpetrator. The government set an ambitious target to more than double the number of adult rape cases reaching court. It looked like the solution, a data-led model for a new era of justice. But in the high-stakes world of criminal justice, even the best ideas can have unforeseen consequences. The very principle that made Bluestone so promising, its intense early focus on the suspect, also carried a dark and dangerous risk. It created a system where the presumption of guilt could start to overshadow the presumption of innocence. For the falsely accused, the nightmare begins with a knock on the door or a phone call. And in those first few hours, the suspect-focused model of Operation Bluestone reveals its most critical vulnerability: the potential for profound investigative bias. In theory, an investigation should be a funnel. Information is gathered from all sides, and the pool of suspects narrows as evidence is tested. Operation Bluestone, however, can turn that funnel upside down. By placing an intense focus on one person from the very beginning, often before a full picture of the evidence exists, it sets a powerful psychological trap for investigators: confirmation bias. It's the natural human tendency to look for and favor information that confirms what you already believe. Once someone is labeled the suspect, the objective search for truth can quietly become a mission to prove that label was right. Suddenly, an ambiguous text message isn't just a text. A gap in an alibi isn't just a memory lapse. It's all viewed through a lens of suspicion. Evidence that points toward guilt gets amplified, while evidence that suggests innocence, or even just uncertainty, can be downplayed, ignored, or twisted to fit the story. This isn't necessarily malicious. It's often the result of a system under immense pressure. Remember that government target to double the cases reaching court. That creates a powerful incentive for police to be decisive, identify a suspect quickly, and build a case that sticks. This can lead to what some researchers call a snowball effect. An early, perhaps premature, focus on one person can bias every decision that follows. It dictates who gets interviewed, what questions are asked, and how evidence is interpreted. This momentum can become nearly impossible to reverse. The system often lacks clear exit strategies, formal ways to stop an investigation when the evidence against the suspect is weak. Once you're on that track, it's incredibly hard to get off. Adding to the problem is a documented lack of experience. The rapid rollout of the Bluestone model has, in some places, outpaced the development of specialized training. Reports have highlighted ongoing workforce issues, with many investigators lacking the expertise for these uniquely complex cases. This can lead to an over-reliance on stereotypes, blinding investigators to the nuances of cases where consent is complex and requires extraordinarily careful and objective assessment. For the accused, one of the most terrifying parts of this is the seizure of their digital life. Under the new model, the suspect's behavior is key, and today, that behavior is all over our phones and laptops. For someone falsely accused, this means their entire digital world is confiscated, often for months or even years, and combed through by investigators actively looking for proof of guilt. Every private conversation, every bad joke, every late-night search is ripped out of context and scrutinized. The goal was to move away from the digital strip search of victims, but in many ways, the process has simply been transferred with equal intensity to the accused. And that's the central problem. Operation Bluestone was created to fix a system that put victims on trial, but in its passion to do so, it has built a new system that can put a suspect on trial from the moment their name is spoken. The very safeguards that protect the presumption of innocence can be worn down by the sheer focused pressure of a suspect-first investigation, leaving innocent people profoundly vulnerable. For those trapped in a flawed investigation, there are two possible endings. The first is a wrongful conviction. Years in prison for a crime you didn't commit, but there's a second, more common outcome. It's when, after months or years of hell, the case is dropped, no charges filed. The Crown Prosecution Service says there's not enough evidence. On paper, you've been exonerated. But in reality, the nightmare doesn't end. It just changes shape. This is the hidden cost of Operation Bluestone's potential for error. The system has no real process for helping someone rebuild a life that's been systematically dismantled by an accusation. Official frameworks are full of detailed plans for supporting victims of crime, as they should be, but they are almost completely silent on what to do for those who have been victimized by the process itself. There are charities and support groups trying to fill this gap, but official support is lacking. The financial ruin can be absolute. Legal fees can wipe out life savings. Many people lose their jobs, suspended the moment an accusation is made, and unable to return because of the stigma, even after being cleared. The reputational damage is permanent. A simple Google search of your name can become a life sentence, forever linking you to a crime you were cleared of. Relationships with friends, family, and neighbors are often shattered by a suspicion that never completely disappears, and the psychological toll is devastating. People describe profound trauma, betrayal, and powerlessness. They suffer from anxiety, depression, and symptoms of PTSD. We know that many survivors of sexual assault find the police investigation itself deeply traumatizing. Now imagine that same invasive and grueling process, but you're completely innocent. You're left with a shattered sense of security and a deep mistrust of the very system meant to protect you. You become collateral damage in a well-intentioned war on crime. This is the fundamental question that supporters of Operation Bluestone must now face. In the righteous and necessary rush to fix historic failings, are we creating a new, equally devastating injustice? We see headlines celebrating that referrals and charges are up, and this is presented as success. But that metric tells us nothing about the accuracy of those charges. It doesn't tell us how many innocent people were swept up in the process, had their lives destroyed, and were then quietly cast aside when the case fell apart. Protecting genuine victims and ensuring a fair investigation for the accused aren't opposing goals. They are essential parts of the same thing: justice. A system that gets one right by getting the other wrong isn't a just system. It's just a system that has swapped one flaw for another. Operation Bluestone was born from absolute necessity. For far too long, our justice system failed victims of rape in the most appalling ways, and the suspect-focused model was a bold and understandable attempt to fix that wrong. But as this model has been rolled out, we've started to see its shadow. We see the profound risk it poses to the innocent, creating a nightmare where the presumption of innocence is worn down and lives are shattered with little recognition or recourse. The current approach, driven by laudable but pressuring targets, risks creating an environment where tunnel vision can flourish. It leaves the falsely accused financially ruined, psychologically scarred, and abandoned by the system that was supposed to deliver justice. They are the unacknowledged victims of a flawed process, their stories lost in the celebratory headlines about rising charge rates. This isn't a call to go back to the old broken ways. It's a demand for something better, a system that understands you don't empower one group by making another vulnerable, a system that invests heavily in training investigators not just to focus on suspects, but to conduct objective, open-minded inquiries, a system that creates real off-ramps for cases built on weak evidence and provides actual support for those who are exonerated, a system that measures success not by the number of charges, but by the integrity of every single investigation. Achieving justice for victims of sexual violence is one of the most urgent challenges we face. But in that pursuit, we cannot sacrifice the bedrock principles of fairness and due process. The question we must ask is this: what does justice truly look like? Is it a system that simply convicts more people, or is it a system that protects the vulnerable, holds the guilty to account, and just as importantly, safeguards the innocent from the devastating power of a false accusation? The answer has to be the latter, because a justice system that fails any one of us ultimately fails us all.